Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Thanks for tuning in today to the First Detachment channel. We got a exciting content for you today. Great guest, Miss Shannon Seeley is joining us. We're gonna get into all kinds of fun things with her today. Shannon, if you don't know, is a top women's physique competitor. She's a well-respected coach in the industry. Overcame a lot of things to get to where she's at today. And she'll talk a little bit later, but she is kind of on the doorstep of a PhD in nutrition. So not all muscle with Miss Shannon. She's definitely got the muscles and the brains to back it up as well. So really excited to have you on. So thanks for joining us, Shannon, and as always, Mr. Justin Harris for jumping on. So
thanks.
So Shannon, I thought we kind of start off with a lot of people out there maybe are at different stages in their training, and you obviously are at the peak of it right now, but I think a lot what we'll unpack today is some of those trials and tribulations to get there. But could you share just kind of with everybody out there a little bit about how did you get started into this whole weightlifting, running, fitness, nutrition type of thing?
Well, I'm going to keep it short because I could tell you my whole life story to be here for 4 days. But I actually started out as a runner, a competitive runner. So I ran cross country and track and field from middle school, high school, and went all state all through high school. So got a few college scholarships for running. My senior year of high school, I actually got a compound fracture to my leg. The beginning of the season, and it actually put me out of my running career for the entire senior year while I was rehabbing it and getting surgery and have everything fixed. And what ended up happening is I was also struggling with bulimia nervosa the entire time I was in high school. So my entire high school career, I was running, but also binging and purging. And so my body was in a really fragile state of health. And so when I broke my leg, a lot of it actually had to do with my bulimia nervosa because my muscles and bones were so weak in supporting the bones. And so as I went to physical therapy and rehab, I was actually put into a gym after physical therapy because my muscles had atrophied so much. And from there, I actually started really enjoying the sport of weightlifting. I started lifting and enjoying just the movements and how when you did one particular movement, you could actually grow the muscle. And I myself put on muscle relatively fast. So my atrophied muscle of my one leg really built up within 4 months. I really had that strength almost back to 90%. While I was also at the gym, though, I saw a competitor at the time, and myself personally never had heard of the sport of bodybuilding. I actually thought females with muscles were kind of gross looking. So it was kind of odd that when I went into it, someone actually told me I looked like Dana and Bailey at that time. Now, this was like 15 years ago. I had shorter hair and didn't know who that was. Looked at her photo online and fell in love with her physique. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. And so I started getting into the aspect of bodybuilding. I hired a coach. And at that time, I was in therapy for my bulimia, and I wanted to learn how to get healthier with so my bones didn't break again and I didn't have all these health issues long term. So working with my nutrition coach at the time and getting healthy, I actually had a healthier body, more muscular, put on 40, 50 pounds of muscle within that time frame of starting to get healthy, but actually loved the way I looked. I actually found confidence that I never had before. So that was really eye-opening to me. And moving forward, when I actually went into college, I actually turned down my scholarships for running because, one, I think that would have relapsed my bulimia severely because of the most of the mileage I would have to put on. And number two, I had just, built this muscle back up and knew that those don't really coincide. If you're trying to put on a ton of muscle, but you're also running 15 miles a day, it's not going to work. So I had to make a choice, and I just felt like bodybuilding was a better way to go with my relationship with food and just trying to get healthy again. Whereas honestly, I probably would be dead if I would have chose the running route.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. It seems like there's a lot of stories out there. I mean, I'm sure Justin has a few that come to mind that of like clients and turning, but go ahead, Justin.
What I think is really interesting is there seems to be like there's like a triad of things that are really closely correlated. It seems like a lot of long distance runners, youth long distance runners, get into this sport and do well in this sport, which you would sort of think is kind of counterintuitive, seeing how, you know, the muscular adaptations are so varied, so different, I guess. But what my thought on it is that the type of youth who's dedicated enough to be, you know, self-motivated enough to be a long distance runner, which you have to be, you know, there's so much work outside of just direct practice, is the type of person who excels in bodybuilding. But the interesting thing on top of that is that a lot of runners also develop eating disorders and disordered eating. But that, I think, is a unique or an interesting kind of correlation with bodybuilding, because that's a difficult jump to make from, it seems like, from bulimia to, you know, eating to add size. You know, how was that transition? Was it just once you understood nutrition and you had a new goal to go for it, you were able to just work right through it? Or
I think the first thing is when I actually started eating. I actually had my first 6-pack when I started actually eating. So that was a huge motivation factor. And people with eating disorders, you know, we have that gratification, and those serotonin levels are so elevated when we have that sense of control, like, oh, I'm controlling the food in me and putting it out of me. And it's almost like you take that addiction and that serotonin high, and I almost kind of reverted into that control of bodybuilding. And you know, people say, oh, you took one unhealthy behavior and kind of moved it into another unhealthy, you know, obsession behavior. And that might be the case where people see it that way. But I think for me is that transition of realizing I can control the types of food I ate and fuel it the right way to my body to actually create a better body that I wanted to envision. And so it's kind of like a reverted the obsession into an obsession in a healthy way. If that makes sense.
Perfect. And I think the people say that you just took one unhealthy thing and, you know, I don't think people understand that it's not a choice. You know, that, you know, things like OCD, compulsive eating or disordered eating, or there's a type of person who gets into the sport, and you said obsessive, and that is exactly it. You have to be the type of person, and I'm the type of person that gets obsessed with things. You know, it's like a shiny new object, and that's the only thing that exists in the world until I master it. You know, it's like that. And you can't control that. You can't just make that go away. And so it's not you're taking one unhealthy thing to an unhealthy thing. It's like you said earlier, if you went down the original path, you'd be dead. You're taking a path towards death and redirecting something that's really out of your control, because it's your nature. You can't just make yourself not be OCD. You can't make yourself not be compulsive. You can't make yourself not be obsessive or any of these things that the other people don't have. So they don't understand it. You've redirected it into, you know, they might not view it as a healthy choice, but it's clearly healthier than dying. And that's, you know, it really bothers me when people say that, because they say it from a position of complete misunderstanding and not understanding that it's an innate thing in you. It's like, you know, if someone has dyslexia, you don't scold them for, you know, choosing a different way to learn how to read. You encourage that, because they're taking something that's innate to them and making a better case of it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the problem is people don't realize that eating disorders are psychological. They're not physical. So when people say, well, why couldn't you just stop eating? You know, why did you starve yourself, or why did you just stop throwing up? It's literally diagnosed as my psychologist says you can diagnose this as a disease. You can get prescribed medication now to help treat this. It is not something that it's just like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore, so I won't. It's always there. And I think the most challenging thing people have to understand with eating disorders is that I'm not knocking any other sort of addiction, but if someone has an alcohol addiction, they can revert away from it. Okay. They can put it in a box in a closet, walk away, and it's still going to be challenging, but they can avoid those temptations. Where eating disorders, we have to eat to live. So it's not as simple as just, you know, I can put food away. No, live, I have to eat. So that control is just the only way in bodybuilding for me, that control of eating, you know, 6 times a day at 1, 3, 5, all those times. It's so perfect for me. And I'm utilizing my psychological issues to my advantage to better myself.
Yeah, it's almost like telling a heroin addict that they have to use heroin 3 times a day, but only a tiny amount that will just barely get them to feel anything, but they can't do any, you know, you would never expect that to work, but they expect, you know, people with eating disorders to just eat normal.
Yep.
Well, I think it's pretty remarkable too. Like I was reading a little bit, I told you about, you know, obviously we've known each other for a little while, but just kind of do a little digging in some articles about your history. And, you know, it sounds like early on, you know, was, if I understood the quote, it said like from plus size to size 0, right? Like where it was like, you know, a lot of those. I always think it's a cool story when people are turn something bad and, you know, not good, you know, whether it was shaming or bullying or whatever, and you kind of turn it to good. And now look at yourself now, you know, with a family, successful, and really making such a positive impact in so many people out there that you coach and train, which I know we'll get into as we kind of progress through our discussion today. But with that, I kind of wanted to transition a little bit into just talking about, you know, your competition history. So you fell into love with weightlifting, you know, decided not to go the running route. Can you just kind of walk through just your timeline as far as, you know, shows you've done and that, how that progress was for you?
So 2010 is when I had my injury. And that's when I graduated from high school. And then I started college. I actually started at OCC, and because I was just going part-time at that time, I was just trying to kind of figure out what I want to do with my athletics, or what I wanted to do. And at that time, even though I was bodybuilding, I was still trying to rehab the legs. I was doing a little bit of running. I wasn't sure the direction, because I was still learning about bodybuilding. I did understand, you know, the financial aspect of it. So that was kind of holding me back going to school and then trying to compete. So what I actually saved up a little bit of money, hired a trainer, and worked with them for about 2.5 years just to see what my body was naturally capable of. And that was really fun to see. You know, this was just like building the base foundation, seeing what food and what working out would actually do and what I look like as a natural base foundation competitor. And I did my very first show in 2014 at the Redford Theater, the Muscle City Classic. Went in there, you know, never doing a show, was not sure. I wasn't even sure if I was posing correctly. It was just brand new to me. And I won the overall for women's physique there.
Nice.
The funny thing was when I was working with my posing coach at that time, she told me that I would never make it in physique. I was way too small, that I should do bikini and then figure. And I was like, no, I want to do physique for my first show. Like, I want that look for DLB. So she really was pushing me against it. So I got mad, fired her, and just did my show in women's physique, won the overall. And then from there, that was 2014. 2015 is when I did the Michigan. And that was my first show I prepped myself for. And I won Miss Michigan Physique in 2015. And that was it. The fire was lit for there because that was a national qualifier. From there, I did nationals the same year, 2015. I had I'll say this. When you win our first national shows, I think sometimes when you start too soon in the sport, you get a little cocky. So I was really young at the time, went into nationals going, this is when I'm going to go pro. Mind you, I did one natural show, started my other show, and then just did this one, and still was pretty young in the sport coming from running. I know I didn't have the muscle density. I placed third call outs, I think one of the last ones for 2015, but it was a really good eye opener to see what I would have to do to obtain the physique that I wanted and how much more work I had to do. 2016, did junior nationals. I placed 9th, so a little bit higher. Still had to add that muscle density on, but I knew as long as I was consistent, putting on the muscle, eating quality food, and I still try to give myself a show every year, because the more that you're competing and the better that you're consistent with your cutting, the better you're going to come in every year. So 2016, I placed 9th in junior nationals. And then I actually did 2 Michigan shows at the end of the year. I believe it was Central and Westerns. I can't remember the order of those. Did those as well. And Michigan shows, I love Michigan NPC, but women's physique is a very light category in the NPC for Michigan. So I think I was the only competitor in both of those shows. So I placed first in them, but I don't think that's really anything to be impressed about.
Nice.
And then 2017, I think I did the same. Go on.
Well, just physique is so hard because the jump from the state to the national level, it's so difficult. And because a lot of times, because what wins at the national level can be sometimes marked down as too muscular at the state level. It's so tough to coach, and wellness is the same way. The wellness girls are huge. You come in that huge like that at a wellness show at the state level, or the same thing at physique. You come in with national level physique hardness at a state level, and another girl with a slightly softer look that won't place well at the national level can sometimes get placed ahead at the state level. It's so hard for you guys. It's very difficult.
I think too, because you get, when you're in these national shows or these local shows, bikini and figure are pretty stacked classes regardless of what state you're in. So you have kind of, you know, if someone wins the overall at these local shows, you have a good idea of what your competitors are going to look like. Where in physique, in wellness, they're so limited with the states right now of who's competing in what. The criteria is so different. I mean, realistically, some people just use these local shows as just warm-up shows for their actual national shows. And most coaches don't do that, the water pulling, you know, protocol, or they don't dry them out. So you really don't even get kind of a taste of what their condition physique is going to look like. So it is very challenging, and it's very surprising for a lot of people who are competing in these smaller state shows when they jump into a national show. And it's just a huge eye opener for them.
Well, I know you're not done with your timeline, but I do want to call something out. So you won a state championship. Justin, when did you win your state championship?
I was exactly 10 years behind her. I won the Michigan in 2004 and then went and did the junior nationals all cocky and got my butt handed to me. But like same thing, I learned what was needed at that level and came back the next year and did much better.
No, I just thought it was funny. She's going through her timeline. I'm like, man, we're getting old. Well, before I competed last year, I was talking to Shannon at the counter. And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. She goes, well, you could always do masters. I'm like, well, F you, I could do masters. Like, what are you talking? I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, look down. I'm like, damn it, I could do masters in a couple months. So, good.
You know what? I never bash the masters because you guys are these masters, the women, the men, especially those that have been in the sport for 20, 30 years. I mean, that muscle maturity and that skin is so thin. It is like an anatomy chart. I say anyone that doesn't masters, I think that you guys have the most difficult shows to compete in because they are just, everyone is just so peeled and just matured with that muscle. That's why I hope I go pro before I'm older because I'm going to be screwed.
I would argue that the men, at least in bodybuilding, probably not in classic, but in bodybuilding, their peak years are probably 38 to 42. And in the women in physique, I would probably argue it. You could stretch that to 45 or later even because of the thin skin thinning, you know, because women tend to have thicker skin younger and it really thins out past 40. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you say masters, but those classes are tough.
Yeah.
And so I think you left off 2017, 18. So, I mean, and for those of you guys who are listening, I mean, if you talk right, like you've been at this, I mean, it sounds like almost 10 years of competing, right? I know we still got a couple more years of history to walk through here, but so I think a lot of people too think, to your point, like I'm going to do my first show, and if I do well, then I'm going to get my pro card at the next one. But it's, you know, you killed it early on, winning the overall in a couple of shows, and then now you've been kind of still grinding at the national level and moving up the ranks. But I think it's important for people to, you know, to just remember that as far as the long-term goal setting. But like walk us through kind of the back half of your competitions.
So 2018 was the highest I ever placed in a national show. I did junior USAs and I placed second. And that was really exciting for me because it was one of the higher, I mean, it was still a junior show, but for you to place top 2 in a junior shows, you know, it kind of gets you pumped up like, okay, I'm getting to the point where I'm actually meeting the criteria that they need. And then 2018, at the end of it, my husband and I got married. So I took that rest of the year off. And then 2019, I was planning on competing, but I got pregnant. So I had my daughter in 2019. So I took that entire year off of competing as well. And then in 2020, I decided and I made the mistake of competing and dieting all through COVID. I started my prep in April of 2020. Well, I was already prepping. I was supposed to do a show in April 2020. And we kept pushing the shows back. And I ended up doing junior USAs in the end of August that year. So my prep went on for about 8.5, 9 months. I was up to 3 hours of cardio a day. I mean, it was brutal. And that one I placed last. I think I placed third. There was only 3 of us. I placed third, but I mean, I was embarrassed myself looking back at the pictures and looking on stage of how beat up my body was. I mean, at that point I looked sick. Like, I mean, like my muscle was gone. I was gone. It just took a lot out of me. But I think for COVID too, it took a lot out of everyone because we didn't know when it was going to end. And like, still, you know, post baby, I was like, I want to go pro. I don't know how much, you know, damage it's done with the hormones. I just want to see if I can do this. So I was motivated to get back and show. women, hey, you can still have a baby and compete. But I think I got rushed into it a little bit too fast. And so I think that actually didn't benefit me as much as I wished it was. So at the end of 2020, I did get a new coach. I was working with another coach for about 6.5 years. I also felt like it was time for a change for my body. After pregnancy, I wanted to get a coach that was a little bit better with hormone detail with that. So I ended up working with my current coach. And we spent that whole year of 2021 where I did compete, but it was more about hormone correcting, getting a new coach, getting him to learn how my body peaks. And we can talk about this later, but I will say with my history of bulimia nervosa, it actually plays a lot with my water protocol and the way that my body absorbs and utilizes insulin and glycogen and any of that. So it took a lot for my coach to kind of get to know how my body responds to the carb and the fat intake. So 2021, I did North Americans at that one. It was a pretty big show because it was post-COVID, so everyone was competing. I placed 6th there. I wasn't mad about it. That class was huge. I think we had 19 people in Class C, so I was pretty pleased with 6th place. Went back again in North Americans this past year and placed 2nd, runner-up. And so I'm really, really happy with the progress I've made. And next year we're going to go new North Americans again and see if we can just finally get that overall or that pro card.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. And Justin, you kind of talked to know about your clients and learning their bodies. I mean, can you kind of share a little bit about your experience with Ed and just as a coach, like, you know, the challenges that come with that and the upside to that as far as like going through a show or two with a client?
Like, I'm sorry, what was the start of that?
Just as far as as a coach, you know, working with a competitor to learn their body and Shannon was talking about like water fluctuations and how her body stores glycogen different, things like that.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the COVID diet, and I think that's a perfect. Sorry,
go right ahead.
I hear your question, and I counter with, but I think that's the hardest thing as a competitor. It's hard as a coach also, but the getting ready for a contest is extremely difficult, very difficult. Probably in many cases, the hardest thing anyone will do. You know, for a lot of people, it's the hardest thing they'll do in their life. However, that's not the goal of the prep. The goal of the prep is to get in shape. That's very difficult to like keep those two things separate, because what gets you in shape is so very, very, very hard. Your brain starts to think that the hard work is actually what it is. You know, and like you said, you kept pushing, and that's so difficult because how do you know when to step back? And everything about you is saying, no, I'll outwork anyone. I'll work, and so it's really hard to walk that line properly. Of, you know, you got to remember the goal is to look good on stage, not outwork everyone on stage. Mm-hmm. You probably are going to have to outwork everyone to look the best, but looking the best is what you're doing, not just outworking everyone. And you can almost tell who's going to be. It's a weird thing because you can almost tell who's going to have a successful long-term career in the sport by the people who do look bad a couple times from doing too much work. Because once they get that sorted out, then they'll finally kind of understand that the goal is to look good, not just outwork everyone. You might have to outwork everyone to look good, but that's like a story. Like it's like tale as old as time. You know The person who's going to succeed, it's got to go through that show or two where they do too much work actually like burn their body out by the time they get on stage.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do, I know, and I think a lot of people say when should the coach step back? You know, I think it was hard. COVID was just a hard time because we never knew when they were going to open things up. So even talking to my coach, he's like, you know, we can probably hold this peak, you know, because it was times where like the show would be next week. So we'd start doing the water protocol, then everything would be shut down. And so it's like, when does that coach, I really think we did it like 5 times. And, you know, as a coach myself, now looking back, we probably should have pulled that way earlier than it had. But I get it when you have those competitors that are working so hard and you just know that they have it. But realistically looking back now, and I know if you were coaching someone in that similar situation, there is a time where you look and be like, listen, you're just so watery now. If you push it so hard, we got to let your body reset, your hormones reset, your receptors reset. I mean, there's only so much stuff you can take too before your body's just like on overdrive. So
no, I mean, I had the same thing with my clients. You know, like hindsight 2020, you'd go back and as soon as the lockdowns happen, you say, look, let's pull the plug, wait it out, see what's going to happen. But you know, you were getting so much conflicting information,
Mhm.
and they're always, they're moving the show back 2 weeks, and it's like, well, I can extend it 2 weeks, and then they move it another week. Yeah, that was a tough year.
Now, was Ben Pollock one of your clients then, Justin? Is that during COVID when he won the Michigan?
Yep. Yeah. He won 2020. Yeah. Same thing. Ben was a little bit different because we just walked on stage at the Michigan because he's always in shape. But we did have to deal with that going into nationals and North Americans, because by then he had, North American was quite a bit past the Michigan. And Michigan, I think they still ended up having it in May. I can't even remember when they had it. That it was one of the very first shows. They held it in the parking lot. Under a tent. But yeah,
I did that show, the Michigan in 2020, and it was definitely, Remy did everything he could to get that show going. I will say, like, probably never again. The lighting, like, everything was just a little off, but we got to compete, and I think that was the biggest thing. But it was a rough show.
Yeah, it's right in the parking lot. Yeah, under a tent. You had that one little gym with the machines to kind of warm up in, and yeah, it was rough.
Well, so finished second. So, in the last show, so kind of knocking on the door of some of your original goals. I think it's, got to be inspiring for people out there that, like you said, you had your daughter, and, had COVID. So you had all these obstacles, still accomplished the peak of your career. What's on stage, on stage, I guess, for you next? Like what's kind of the next thing you're looking to tackle here?
Right now, it's just getting through to my prep for North Americans. That actually will start probably in early February. We start pretty early, and that's just because of my past history. And now being a mom, it takes a little bit longer for my skin to tighten up. So you just do a slow, smooth, easy transition into my prep, which honestly is easy because I have an off-season diet I pretty much follow to a T. And then we just start, changing food up a little bit here and there. So it's a really easy transition into my prep. And that's primarily my focus. Is what I do is once I get into prep mode, my husband knows, my clients know I'm in prep mode. There are certain protocols, even for my check-ins, where, and I don't know if you're like this, Justin, but when I start prepping and I'm really hard into prep, I will tell my clients, like, sometimes, like, hey, I'm in prep. I don't take competitors when I'm in my prep myself, because I feel like I can't give my 100%, especially when I'm in those last few months of prep. And that's just primarily my focus. My husband and I homestead. So at home, it's my chickens and my farm and all of that. So it's a nice, relaxing time to be, decompressed from everything. And I just try to keep my mental state. My main thing is because I'm so, like, high anxiety, high OCD. I have to revert myself away from, like, technology, social media, and just be outside and just try to keep my anxiety and stress low. Just with me and the way my cortisol just responds, it can just make or break my prep.
Yeah, Justin, did you want to add anything to that? I know you have a lot of experience with helping athletes manage stress, and yourself when you were an athlete.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't compete anymore, but absolutely. And I learned my lesson the hard way at the 2005 Junior Nationals. I had 7 people, including myself, in that show. Every single person beat me. I had a class winner, 2 second place in the class. I think everyone but one other person was top 5 in their class, and then I was, like, out of the top 15. But something's got to give. And if you're a good coach, it's going to be your physique, And so if you're a good coach, don't prep people while you're prepping, because, if you're going to stay a good coach, then something has to give, and it's going to be your physique.
I think I was there because that's when Phil Heath won Junior Nationals, right?
Yeah. He beat Chris Perticari. Chris would have won the over. Chris, and then Darren Dudash and Brad Davis, who eventually turned pro, were both top 5 in juniors also. And so, we very likely would have had an overall in that show if Phil didn't show up and just dominate.
Yeah, it was definitely definitely a little different than a state show. That was my first experience at a national show when we went there, and it was definitely some different physiques there. So, So I know both of you are coaches, so I thought it'd be kind of fun just to maybe kick around a few topics. There's a lot of different ways to kind of get to the same result, and then also out there's a lot of noise and some incorrect stuff, so maybe we can kind of kick around a few philosophies and or approaches that you have. So Shannon, we'll first kind of kick it over to you. What's your general approach as far as, like, setting up a like a plan, if it's either a prep plan or to help somebody to dial in their physique? What does that look like if you were to map it out, days, weeks, etc.?
So usually, first thing is I I love training lifestyle clients more than I love training competitors. So I typically don't take competitors unless someone really wants me to prep them. And that's more so because my coaching philosophy is more to create a sustainable lifestyle. Whereas, bodybuilding prep is great for those, like myself, who want that, really regimented eating schedule. But realistically, for 90% of the population, that diet technique is not going to work for a lot of these people. Right. So as a coach, I give them a whole intake form, make them, and every coach has their little questionnaire thing. But the main thing I like to look at is their eating patterns. I have people that if they're intermittent fasting and it's been working for them, I'm not going to change it, but I'm going to change or maybe change the amount of food they're going to eat per meal. Or, if somebody really, doesn't like eating breakfast, I usually will, allow them to see the benefits of having a breakfast and have them try it out. But I slowly like to integrate different things in at a time. So my programs are a lot different than a lot of lifestyle coaching programs, because what happens is we're working like month by month, changing little behaviors at a time, because it's the behaviors over time that are going to create consistency. Whereas if I give somebody, here's a new plan for you, I want you to start following it, realistically, it's not going to work. So instead, right, we'll start something like most clients, they need to start with a base foundation. Are you getting your water in? Are you getting sleep in? So I always start with the smaller changes first, especially for females. Most females that are asking for help want the help. And so they're going to do what you say. So usually if I say, hey, your goal is to try to get in, 80 ounces of water today, that's all I need you to do. And we start small steps like that. And I have found that works better for a lot of my lifestyle clients because it's creating sustainable habits. So as we add more food, they're not shocked about the amount of food that they're eating, because their metabolism is already responding to these little changes that we've already implemented.
Sure. Yeah. Justin, how about, I know you also work with lifestyle as well as competitors. A lot of people kind of know you in your competitive coaching, but lifestyle stuff, what are some things you experience or approaches you have? Because that's a trick. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, well, because my first job after school, undergrad, was nutritionist for cardiology group. And I still, through word of mouth, I still have ancestors, I guess, from that. So my lifestyle they're usually not, I'm usually competitors or people serious about lifting, or non-competitors, but there's a specific reason: IBS, Crohn's, SIBO, Candida, or diabetes, heart disease, things like that. And so it really depends on that. If they're IBS type things, we'll put them on a low FODMAP diet. But for the general consensus with those people is I try to teach them the pick it, kill it, grow it diet, meaning that if you can't pick it from a tree, grow it in a garden, or hunt it for meat, then you shouldn't be eating it. I say you're not going to watch My 600-Pound Life and find people who just can't stop eating vegetables, where right. I'm sorry, doctor, I just can't stop eating plums. So you teach them your body's pretty self-regulatory when you eat those types of foods, the foods that go through zero processing, and so yes. that's really what we start with, is teaching them that you have to eat less calories than you burn to lose energy from the body, to lose body mass. You can't skirt that. But the nice thing is calories aren't directly related to food volume. There's a lot of calories in a Big Mac. You can eat 3 times the volume of a Big Mac for half the calories and still eat tasty food if you just choose your food sources differently. So that's really the core of it with my lifestyle clients, teaching them that whatever we do, when we're done, if you learn to stick to these healthy food choices, you have a lot more leeway and a lot more wiggle room before things go off the rails.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important thing for people to go ahead.
I love how you're talking about the pick it, grow it. That's a huge thing. Is my husband and I went completely chemical free this year. Like even my hair products, obviously there's certain medications I take for bodybuilding, but regardless of that, everything, we don't even do diet soda, anything that has processed or any preservatives, or you have to open through plastic, we don't have. And it was interesting is my husband actually, and he competes, he actually lost about 20 pounds from just switching to chemical free. We did not change the amount of protein he was eating, the amount of fat he was eating, the amount of carbs. We didn't change cardio. It was just from switching from those Diet Cokes and switching from our hair products that had chemicals in them. And it's just so amazing and eye-opening to see what all this additional crap is doing. But people in today's age want the convenience. So they're not willing to take that and spend a little bit more money and get a fresh fresh grown orchard apple. Instead, they're going to go to the store and get the packaged stuff. And it's just so disheartening because I tell people, like, your health is so much more important overall. It's okay if you're going to spend more on your food because you're going to spend less at the doctor's.
Yeah, and it's amazing the things you see. Well, I have celiac, and so I can't eat gluten. That's my punishment for making fun of people who ate fad diets forever, is that I got the gluten. But in Mexico one time, I accidentally ate a flour tortilla without realizing it, and barely had any issues. Because the way they process their wheat is totally different than the way we do. And I'll even notice my clients, because I do high carb days, and on the high carb days, there'll be very high carbohydrates, and I typically give clients in each meal up to 50% of the carbs can come from sugary sources. And I see and I've been tracking this, I see a very, very clear difference in reporting and how the clients report, how they feel, what they think. Can't really measure inflammation, but what they think their inflammation is and what they look like as far as inflammation and water retention when they eat those sugary sources from things like Twizzlers or low fat processed candies versus eating those sugars from fruit. It's like a world of difference. It's really, really interesting to see. But yeah, I think there's so many issues that we have right now that at some point will be correlated, at least indirectly, to the processing of the foods we eat. Things like all the IBS issues, the low testosterone in men, so many like weird kind of fringe illnesses that pop up much more often than they used to. And then certainly things like type 2 diabetes and stuff. And like you said, with your husband losing weight, I think one of the things that I do with my clients, and then a lot of clients get really frustrated at first, is I will list a protein amount in a meal, a macro, and I'll give a meal plan also, but I'll say, 50 grams of protein in this meal. And I'll give a list of choices to make that protein from. And things like turkey breast, chicken breast, and 96.4 ground beef will all be in that list. And they'll say, well, those have different fat amounts. Why am I not counting the fat? And I'll try to explain to them that, these things aren't made in a pharmaceutical facility. You're talking about some butcher who's grinding up the lean portions of the meat and calling it 96.4. They're not doing any kind of like, pharmaceutical grade measurements. And then chicken, when you're eating real chicken, those things will vary. Just like all three of us have different body fat percentages. If we were a food source, they would just say we were 85-15. One of us might be 15%, but some of us are different. And the chicken's the same way. No two chickens have the exact same body fat percentage. So when you read those food labels, you're just seeing like a conglomerate average of whatever group of chickens they measured at one point through some bomb calorimetry to get an estimated average fat for those chicken. While the average chicken breast is going to have less fat per 3 ounces or whatever than 96.4 ground beef, a very lean portion of 96.4 ground beef will actually have less fat than a particular fatty chicken breast. And so by trying to be overly precise with those measurements, you're actually introducing inaccuracies in your measurement. Now, when you take that to the level of mass processed food production, when you're talking about something where they're just pouring, tons of high fructose corn syrup and something, mixing it up, and they're saying, 22 grams of sugar per serving. Yeah, well, maybe it's 26 the next time, maybe it's 20. And so those things add up, over meal after meal after meal. When you're eating organic foods, healthy foods, pick it, kill it, grow it foods, those differences in the indirect calories that you're assuming, you're assuming the food label says this, and that's what calories you're eating. But what the calories actually are is always going to be, like a bell curve. But the bell curve of real food is much more condensed. You don't get, like Robert Waldlow was 8'11" 3/4" or whatever. He's as far as height, he's at the extreme end of that bell curve. But most of us are pretty close in height, and that's what like normal food that was grown in normal conditions has a pretty narrow bell curve, and so you can be, the range of your varied indirect calories is much different than when you're eating like mass processed foods. You're saying the calories here, but one time the calories might be way over here, the next time way over there, and over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meals, that will add up to potentially a 20-pound body fat difference, even though technically you ate the same calories as far as the food label said, because who knows what these people are really putting into, you're trusting things down to the, decimal place of a gram for these macronutrients from these same corporations that you wouldn't trust, your family you wouldn't trust to babysit your kids for an hour, but you're trusting them to 0.2 grams on a measurement for a macronutrient.
Well, when they allow, our country allows a lot more chemicals and a chemical processed stuff compared to 90% of the other countries. And that always question, I always question that. Why are the US, why do they allow so many of these chemicals that are banned everywhere else to be able to be consumed in the US? And, we're one of the most obese countries in the world.
Right. Well, I'm curious too, Shannon. Obviously, we just talked about, and we just barely scratched surface about all the ins and outs of nutrition and misinformation, things like that. What is it that you do when you're first working with a client? How do you help them not be so overwhelmed and kind of guide them through that process?
First thing I always ask for is blood work. I like to take a look at their blood work, see where they're at. If they haven't gotten blood work, I think that's the biggest thing that some coaches forget to ask is you need to look at blood work. You need to see if they're having thyroid issues, if they're diabetic. You need to look at the way the body responds to certain stuff. I've had clients that, oh, I've been eating right for so long, I want to hire you. I'm like, well, have you gotten blood work? And then we look and they're just low testosterone, where it's something like a simple fix. So I think the number one thing that I always ask for is a recent copy of your blood work, or have you gotten your blood work done recently? And then we go from there, take a look at that and see, if there's any underlying issues before I can actually look and see their lifestyle and how we're going to kind of revert into some new lifestyle changes for them. And just kind of like Justin, when I'm slowly integrating new foods or protein sources, I do also do a list, of the certain proteins that I really highly recommend. I'll have ones that I really, the best proteins, and then I might go to the second source where it's going to be more of like this, the higher sodiums, where we have like the processed jerkies or something like that, where we can still kind of implement them as protein sources. That's where I'm looking at like Greek yogurts and cottage cheeses, stuff that's not the best wholesome, but we can still kind of bypass, and add that as protein sources, and just slowly, give people options. And I think that's kind of the hardest thing for lifestyle clients is you can't give them such a limited variety where they feel they're so restricted where it's going to revert them back to their old ways, but you can't give them so much where they're just going to start picking and choosing where it's not going to give them the changes that they need. So I think as a coach, it's just smart to learn how your client's going to be with the way that they choose foods. And I always straight up, I go, are you one of those? And I know that I would like to be told what to eat, exactly when to eat, and I'll follow it. And there are people that say, give me exactly what to eat, the amounts, and I'll follow it. And there's other people who are like, I like variety. I get bored eating the same chicken and rice meals all day. And that's kind of where as a coach, you need to learn what's going to set your client up for failure and what's going to revert them back to their old ways.
Yeah. I heard the analogy before, like are you a cook or a chef, right?
Yeah.
Like the chef is like, this is like the specifics. And then the cook is like, generally this is kind of the food choices. But Justin, you're going to say something to that?
Yeah, no, I think what she said about the varied protein source and stuff is so important because people don't understand. People, like we live this, so I can't remember a time I didn't know what protein was or what the essential amino acids were. It's been 35 years. So, but most people don't know anything. Most diabetics don't know what a carbohydrate is. And so another very important thing that she just touched on is to kind of teach people that there's a difference between being perfect and being terrible. And that's what you'll see a lot with lifestyle people is you'll tell them these foods to eat and they think, well, that I don't have that food or I'm at a restaurant and that food, the meal I'm supposed to eat isn't available to me. Therefore, I'll just eat cheesecake. And you say, so a lot of times what you can make progress with lifestyle people right out of the gate just by saying, okay, you go to a restaurant and you look and there's 2 or 3 things that look good. So all 3 of those things were something you want to eat. Now, instead of just deciding between those 3 based on what you think is going to taste the best, all 3 of them are going to taste good and it's a tough decision. Now make the decision based on which one's healthiest. And that alone is enough usually to really make a positive impact on people because, I'm a meat, sodium, fat type guy. So if I were a completely lifestyle person, I'd go and I'd say, ooh, chicken wings, those look good. Ooh, ribs, those look good. Ooh, sirloin steak and potato, that looks good. All 3 of those look good. And so a lifestyle person will be like, which one's going to taste the best? And maybe I'm going to take chicken wings. Where now I'll say, all 3 of those look good to you. Now, how about instead of just picking on taste, let's say we know the sirloin and baked potato is going to be our best option. Make that decision and boom, rather than 1,200 calories in the wings, now we have 800 calories. Right there, we've cut, 400 calories out. You do that every single day of the week and you're at nearly a pound of fat a week lost. And you're still eating food you want to eat and you're still eating at a restaurant. It's like learning that the difference that there's a range from like eating, fried butter to, eating the absolute perfect food. And as long as you stay closer to this good end to start out, you're going to start making progress.
Yeah, no, I think it's it's definitely some good info out there. And I think just for context too, Justin, it's for those who don't know, I think it's pretty well documented, right? You said 20 plus years in the industry, degrees in the field. Myself was a passion of mine, went to school for it. Shannon, I think it's, interesting that all three of us like decided to commit a lot to our education and invest in it, not only with money, but our time in our younger years. And now, Shannon, you're going to be pursuing a PhD in nutrition sciences. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's interesting is, I'm just finishing up my master's, and Stanford University actually has this new dual program where you can go get your doctorates and PhD together. It's a very intense accelerated program. So I got offered this by one of my professors, so I applied for it, got accepted. I'm not going to be starting actually until there's two different ways I could go into it. I could start it in May, or I could start it in September, because I'll be in prep, and I'm still, as much as I love my education, my pro card's also the goal too. So I thought the smartest thing would to just get through this prep, not stress about the school, and then start that in the fall, because North Americans is the first day in September, I think. So semester doesn't start. So that's going to be really exciting for me, because I started college and it was a culinary degree. I wanted to go for culinary. I just wanted to cook really good food and get people fat. So then switching all the way over as I started getting into health and fitness, got my master personal training. I've been personal training now for a decade. Love that. And what's better than learning the ins and outs? People are getting the best bang for their buck, because, I have this background in nutrition, and I also can implement the techniques at the gym to kind of help them build their dream lifestyle that they want, their dream physique. So, I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I think, one of the things I think about when you're talking about that is I'm sure people would maybe, look at you and what you've accomplished and think that you're going to have that same expectation. But I think it's important for people to understand and look at someone, not only how they look, because there are some people genetically that are gifted, or maybe they have a really good coach, but they really don't know what they're talking about or doing, or just basically they could pretty much do whatever and they're going to look the way they look. And then there's other people, like yourself and Justin, have invested a lot of time into education, knowledge. And although you're both well accomplished in competing, it's also like you can take somebody from, just nothing and really progress them to where they want to be with their lifestyle.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing, especially, learning all the background of how the body fuels, what nutrition, how important nutrition is when you're in the sport of bodybuilding, but then implementing it yourself. I know when I started, I was in, I think 19 or 20, and now I'm in my 30s, and it's interesting and enjoyable to see, like, as I age and I compete, the muscle maturity and how my skin starts to thin more, as I keep competing. And it's one of those things you can't rush. And I tell people, you get these younger competitors that are, I'm going to go pro and I'm going to the Olympia, and great dreams and all, but you can't rush the process. I tell people there's nothing, genetically, you're going to have that grainier skin when you're younger. If you already have those genetics, if not, you got to play the card, let that muscle maturity set in, and, allow your body just kind of slowly transition. I know this is the leanest my off season has ever been. I haven't changed anything. I'm still following my diet, but I think because I've been doing it now for so long, my body's just responding so much better, and that muscle maturity is there. I'm like, oh, well, I have abs in my off season. That's never happened, but I'm still eating 350 grams of carbs a day. So I think it's just really exciting to see, like, hey, this does work. The sport does work. It's everything that we talk about with the consistency and the timeline works. It's fun to see it get put into place, especially now being in this a decade, and how I looked at my off seasons from 2014 to now, 2022, it's night and day difference.
Yeah, I think it's even more so. You say you can't rush the process. I think even more so, if you do rush the process, you'll ruin the process, especially for the men, because you really don't reach your peak until you're 38 to 42. And the things it takes to get to the peak, you can't do for 20 years. Your body will break down. And so if you start doing those things at 22, you got 10 years or so before things start falling apart. And it's like, great, you were a really good 26-year-old bodybuilder, but then your body falls apart at 32, a full decade before you would have actually got to see what your true potential was. And you see that time and time and time again. People burst on the scene, try to skirt the system and try to, push it too quick. And it never works, because it can't work. It's almost by definition, because the things you have to do to reach that peak physique, you can't do for 20 years and come out, unscathed.
Yeah, I think you were, go ahead.
And my advice, for competitors that are coming in, I tell this all the time, you get these competitors that are like, I want to go on a show. I want to take X, Y, and Z. I want to get big. I want to get massive. Biggest advice I tell every competitor, you have to jump on the stage and do a show natural. You have to see what your body's capable of. You have to get your diet right and your cardio and your training right first. See what a couple of years of natural training and natural food will do for you first, because some of these natural competitors are so impressive of what they can bring to the stage. As where you get the younger competitors jumping on to all these compounds before they're actually matured enough. By the time that they are peaked, it's already gone. They've ruined their test levels. They've ruined what they could have achieved because they've already polluted their body with so much stuff, not allowing those natural receptors to grow and develop into the maturity.
Yeah. And if you want to have if you're going to do this for 20 years, 25 years, you're going to have to spend some time not sauce to the gills. You're just going to have to. And if you don't ever learn to do that, that's not going to bode well for you when you have to do that, several years in. You have to take some extended time at, with the men, maybe at TRT levels, even if you don't completely come off. But if you never learn to train that way, it's a rude awakening, and a lot of guys don't make it through it, and so they don't do it. And it goes back to that same thing where there's only so long you can push before before the wheels fall off. You can't redline an engine for 200,000 miles. You can get 200,000 miles out of an engine if you take care of it, but not redlining it.
Yeah, it's it's like that. I think you've said this too, Justin, like that 5 to 10 pounds a year of stage weight, right? So if you look at, even if I think back to when we competed, at the state level, someone like Steve Kuklo, right? He's been doing it for over 20 years. He competed, I think, on stage 230 when he was at state.
He was 207. I don't know why I remember this. It was maybe 201 or 207. It was like an odd number when he won the Teen Nationals the first time, and I think he was 211 the next time. And then he dabbled, and it was like 240 at his first real show. But he's, I think the perfect example is Nick Walker. Mm-hmm. I don't know that a human has ever added muscle faster than Nick Walker has. So you have a case study of the most rapid muscle growth in human history. Right? He started competing in 2012 at 120 pounds less than he weighs right now. So the dude gained 120 pounds of pure muscle. That's a lot of muscle. I know no one would say like, wow, that's a small amount of muscle. Everyone's going to see that. But that's over 10 years. That's 12 pounds a year, 1 pound a month for a decade. People don't realize it. And that's the fastest any human has ever grown. So you got these people who think they're going to add, 10 pounds a month. It's like, well, we have evidence. This guy over here grew faster than any human in recorded history, and he only did 1 pound a month. So you're bound by these boundary conditions. You can't skirt it. You can try to push past it, but you can't fight, physiology. And so if you don't understand those things and understand that you need to learn, it's more than just, it's fun to be in it for the drag race, when you're blasting and everything's clicking and this is fun, but that's not what the sport is. The sport's like 24 hours at Le Mans. So you have to, like we just read before, you have to learn to train without the stuff, train when you're not on everything, and eat when you're not on everything. And if you don't learn to do that, you're in for a rude awakening at some point.
Yeah. And I know as a female myself, I tell any female that, starts getting into compounds, you have to set limitations for yourself. You have to, especially for females, if you don't set limitations, meaning if you don't, make a personal choice, say, I'm only going to go this far, or when I start changing to this amount, I'm done. If you don't, there's no end. And, some of these women, I have friends that have just basically destroyed their long-term health because of all these commitments. And the stage is great. The trophies are great. The recognition is great. But at the end of the day, we have our entire lives. Bodybuilding is only such a percentage. And it pains me to say that because I'm just as passionate as both of you about bodybuilding. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a nice thing. We look back at 89 years old and be like, hey, I was great. I was a bodybuilder. And look, I still have my health because I actually went off. I was allowed myself to cleanse my receptors and just listen to my body. And, for me, I was able to get pregnant. Like that was my goal. I want to have another baby as well. So I really pay attention to my off-season health to make sure that I can get my menstrual cycle back and I'm able to kind of still have my normal female hormones regulated in the off season to make sure they all come back. And I think that's really important, especially for females, because when we hit, menopause and postmenopause, our hormones are just out of whack. And if you've already messed them up, it's a long-term damage that you'll have to deal with.
Yeah, and for me, the frustrating thing about that is because when we talk about that, the younger people listening will hear that as that's like a concession. Like you're not giving it all to the sport. It's like, well, no, it's the exact opposite. If you don't do that, you're never going to see what you can achieve in the sport. And that's what's really frustrating. It's the same thing with health, like a lot of guys don't, like when you said blood work, people don't want to get blood work because they don't want to know what's wrong with them. It's like, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. If you know what's wrong with them, then you can fix it and continue on in the sport. If you don't fix it, there's going to be a hard end that you don't know is coming. You're running into a brick wall that you don't know is there. If you know that brick wall is there, then you can take a different path and continue on in the sport. We need to be better about educating it, and that doing these things to make sure you're healthy and you survive the sport doesn't mean you don't succeed in the sport. That's what lets you succeed in the sport, because it's what's going to give you the longevity to make it till you're at your peak years.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I think I know we're about to come up on time pretty soon here, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But one of the things we do to wind down is we go through our segment that we call shoot, move, communicate. So it'll be a little rapid fire questions for you. So what I want to do is go through that, and then just to make sure I say it now so I don't forget later, definitely want to plug all the ways where people can find you and find information if people want to follow up with you or reach out and those types of things. But so if you're ready, we'll get started. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right, good stuff. All right, first one, pretty easy. What accomplishment in competing has made you the most proud?
My comeback at North Americans when I placed runner-up after having my daughter.
Good deal. What accomplishment outside of competing made you most proud?
Being a mom, getting pregnant, having a baby.
Cool. And how old's your daughter now?
She's 3.
3. Oh, good times. All right. I think, Justin, what do you have? 4 now, right? And you have 1.
4 daughters. I have 5 daughters right now, except 4
5.
daughters, and then an exchange student who's leaving us in a week. But yeah.
So pretty busy. All right. One word to describe a physique competitor. What would it be?
Oh, beautiful. I love it's art. We're art.
Awesome. All right. A word of encouragement to young up and coming females struggling with body image. What would you tell them?
Talk to people in the industry, communicate. We all female competitors have body issues. We all have body issues in the sport of bodybuilding. Even the men do. We're never good enough. We're never big enough. Talk to us. We all can relate.
Good deal. All right. Next question, a little different, changing gears here. If you had to miss one, what would it be? A meal, a night of sleep, or a training session?
Training session.
All right. We talked a little bit before. I know you were using a certain weight loss product, but just what is your favorite ingredients in any kind of that you like to look for inside of a weight loss product?
I love to see yohimbine, HCl, and caffeine. Those are the top 2. I mean, those 2 components for any prep are great to really boost that metabolism and help with the weight loss.
Good deal. And all right, winding down here. So one word that is a parallel to your approach in both competition and business. So I know you have a successful coaching business and obviously successful competing. We talked a lot about. What would be that word to describe that parallels both?
For myself, I mean, I'm driven to accomplish both of them. I want them both to grow huge. So
there you go. Good deal. Well, I think it does, it does translate over. I know Justin's been on a lot of different shows talking about that, if you have the same work ethic and drive for competing, and you can take that same effort and translate it into your education as you're doing into, business.
Yeah, that's my biggest pet peeve with this sport. You got all these people, the amount of self-motivation and hard work and dedication it takes to get on stage, and people don't apply it to anything else. It's like, if you can compete successfully, there's nothing you can't be successful at.
Yeah. I think they got to find that passion. It took me a minute to find that passion, but it's when you find that niche, you're going to be good at it. You got to find what you're passionate about. Don't settle for the money. You got to settle for what you're passionate about.
And the money comes when you find passion anyways, too.
There you go. Speaking of passion, please share your passion about school. And if there's anything you could elaborate on your area of study within your PhD.
Well, I love school. I love learning different things about the body. I mean, just me from my eating disorder and seeing how it has damaged, but also kind of changed the way that my body can respond to different protocols. I think that's been the most interesting to learn. And now I do want to do, when I go into this PhD program, I want to focus a little bit more on disordered eating, just so that way you know, there's the coaches, we all have a little bit of background with eating disorders, but eating disorder clients, you know, and no offense, because, you know, me as recovery, but we can be a pain in the ass because of the way that our body regulates stuff. And with that relationship with food, sometimes there's a lot of competitors that do have eating disorders. So being able to just kind of have a little bit more knowledge about how to kind of acquire and kind of work with people who have eating disorders that are competing, I guess that's kind of like a catch-22 because it sounds horrible, but at the same time, like we all have that little eating disorder background for the competitors. So I think just kind of learning how to just take that addiction and just kind of process it into a healthier way with the sport is going to really help me through the PhD program. That's kind of what my focus is going to be on, is just like the sports-based nutrition with eating disorders.
Awesome. Well, the last one is we talk a lot at First Detachment about, you know, being just battle tested, right? And so one of the questions we have is how have you overcome a recent battle or maybe a upcoming battle that you're preparing for? You can pick either of the two.
Well, I will say that my second place in North Americans, I can't say didn't sting a little bit. So I think that really put me in perspective of if I wanted to continue with the sport. I'm not going to lie, I did take a little bit of time off thinking about if I was going to continue, just because the stage is always there. I've been doing it for a decade. I was really concerned with my long-term health, especially if I want to have another baby. So I did battle with that. I took about 4 weeks off after my show. I rebounded, you know, with my off-season diet, but I didn't train a lot. I was just kind of in a depressed state. So I think this comeback for North Americans next year, I'm all in. You know, we talked to my coach, talked to my husband. We're ready to do this. And I think that's what I'm getting prepared to battle for now, is just this redemption at North Americans next year.
No, I think that's a really great point to it you made at the end that I didn't get into earlier, but, you know, could you just share the importance of, you know, I know your husband and how supportive he is. Like, how important is that when you're trying to compete and you have the family? Like, how does that impact you and what you're able to accomplish?
You know, it's really, I met my husband in the midst of my bodybuilding career. And, you know, it's one of those things where he understood how passionate I was. And even being a mom now, it's almost like he's like a single parent sometimes when I'm in prep, you know, especially if I'm on my cardio, I'm at the gym all day working, and then I have to do my post-workout cardio. So it's one of those things where we've kind of have that mutual like respect that, hey, this is what you want to do. I'm supporting you with this. I'm encouraging you to do this. So I'm going to pick up the slack with the household. So it's really nice in that aspect. The only downfall I will say, and I know I get kind of bitchy when I'm in prep. I really try not to take it out on anyone.
So do I.
I really try not to. But, you know, those few 4 to 6 weeks right before your show, especially, I will say that the last 2 weeks, my mental state is just not there. I mean, I even read emails and I'm like, what did I just say to you? Like, people don't understand. Like, we are almost stupid when we're like 2 weeks out. Like, it's just, you can't hold a full conversation. I mean, your attention spans, you're just thinking about food, you're thinking about sleep. So I think for people who are in relationships or with their significant other, there's a like, I understand that I'm kind of bitchy, but at the same time, like, there is a point where you don't understand that you're bitchy because you can't really comprehend, or your brain's processing so slow that, you know, my husband knows, okay, you're only going to be bitch for another 4 weeks and then you're good. All right, let's get through it. So I think it's just that sacrifice, knowing every year, you know, it's the dread. Oh, she's 4 weeks out. Here it comes. But you know, we've done it now for so long. Everyone's supportive of it. Nobody talks to me for 4 weeks. And, you know, my mom doesn't call me, nobody. And we just get through it. And then everyone just is happy when I'm out.
There you go. Good deal. Well, really appreciate you joining us tonight. Want to, you know, definitely give you a chance. A lot of great things you overcome, a lot of information, knowledge you have out there. Where can people find you? Where's the best ways to locate you in social media?
I'm most active on my Instagram platform, Shan is Fierce, or Shannon Seeley. You can look at them. And then from there, my coaching page literally tagged onto my main profile, Team Shannon Seeley. So you can go to that coaching page. The website's linked to there. And that's where you can find me. Basically, I have them split so that way I can really focus on the progress my clients have made on the one page, and then the other one's more just my fitness and personal training information on the other. So Shannon Seeley is the best way to find me on Instagram, and then all my links are literally on my bio for the other pages I'm connected to.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for joining us. A lot of great information in the episode today, and we'll be sure to put this out there for everyone to enjoy. And please, as usual, everyone, just that reminder to subscribe, like, and comments definitely below, and share your feedback or questions with us. We'll be happy to link Shannon in there so that she can help us answer any of your questions you have out there. So we'll see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Shannon.